the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz, a conversationalist. We all know that what makes a great dinner party isn't really the food. It's really about the company, the people who are seated around the table engaging in lively discussions. We wanted to create a way to capture smart and important conversations as they happen. I am pleased to be in the company of Cheryl Taylor, who recently stepped down as the CEO and president of the Follinger Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So you've stepped down after working with the organization for 3 decades.
3 decades.
And you are going to remain on the board of directors.
I am.
So there's a good continuity there. And so tell me a little bit about the history of the Follinger Foundation.
Oh, the Follinger Foundation was established in 1958 by Helene Follinger, who was the owner and the publisher of what was the afternoon daily newspaper, the New Sentinel, and her mother, Esther. I always want to make sure that I explain to people that Esther Follinger was intimately involved in this. She was a little more of a behind-the-scenes person. Helene certainly was the public face. So the foundation was established in 1958. It has just recently celebrated its 62nd year. It's an Allen County-based philanthropic entity.
And it's a private charitable foundation, correct?
That's correct.
And what is that?
A private foundation, in many ways, is exactly what it sounds like. So it is a charitable funding vehicle established by one or more persons. Could be an individual, could be a family. In this case, as I mentioned earlier, it was Miss and Mrs. Follinger, but they were the only donors. So a private foundation typically has a limited number of donors.
And then what you do. So based on assets, I believe you're the 4th largest foundation in Northeast Indiana now?
Well, it's a moving target.
Right.
And certainly the experiences that we've all had recently significantly affect that. So it's always in the top 10,
right.
for sure.
But
Usually the top 5.
But you don't increase the amount that the foundation has by donations. You invest money in other entities to raise money that you then use to give out grants, award grants.
That's exactly correct.
Right.
There are no more individual donations to it. So the only way you grow the portfolio is by your investments.
And you, on average, award $9.8 million in grants a year?
Again, it's a rolling number. It depends on what your total assets are. So in any given year, it might be somewhere between 7.5 and 9.5. Really, it's dependent on your total amount.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so, and what is the vision of the foundation? What was it that the Follingers set forth that they wanted it to do within the community?
Well, their vision really was to encourage people to help people move from dependence to independence, and then to interdependence, which Ms. Follinger also phrased a slightly different way, which I sometimes prefer. It was helping people to help themselves to help others, which is a very community-minded focus. She was often made the statement that as a community, we are, as a whole, a family. So that's really the vision. Mm-hmm. And then the foundation's mission, of course, is to provide, well, clearly grants, as you referenced, but also leadership, speakers, a leadership program, lots of workshops and seminars, a number of other vehicles beyond just the grants in order to help really support nonprofits.
Well, let's talk about the whole leadership aspect, because I think that's really novel, and I believe that it is something that one of the most things that you're most proud of during your time at the foundation is the effort and the attention and the programs that you have created with leadership. And most people would be surprised that a foundation has programs of leadership. So why is the focus of leadership important in the nonprofit world?
Because Helene Follinger was a leader, particularly in her time and in her era as a woman in that era, but she took it very seriously. And her father was really her guiding light ahead of her, and her father was a community leader and took it very seriously and really talked about the importance and the value of that. And so if our goal is to work alongside our colleagues in the nonprofit sector who are providing charitable services, they have as much of a need for ongoing education and training as anybody in the for-profit world. And there are lots of statistics around this. The most recent ones that I have, unfortunately, are a couple of years old, but basically say that for every dollar spent on a nonprofit person for ongoing education and training, the for-profit sector will spend $22. So if you think about that, it's an enormous disservice, but to our friends and our colleagues who are providing these very important services to the community. So Ms. Follinger specifically had an interest in that. It's part of what we refer to in our private foundation lingo as donor intent. And it just followed through the history of the foundation. So we've been providing workshops, seminars, wonderful national speakers, people you've heard of, people you've never heard of, who brought great wisdom and insights to the community. And then the more we look at that and the more we evaluate that, it became very clear that what would be a correct role for us would be to provide an actual leadership training program.
Right. So you introduced that in what year?
2016.
Right.
And we've just finished our 8th cohort. 12 people in each. Well, a couple of them had different. So we're around 105 people who've been through that, and there are 2 tracks: one for executive directors, and one for what the foundation refers to as rising leaders. The rising leaders, of course, are identified by their own leadership and then ask if they wish to participate. Nobody's assigned. And you are right, Sarah. I do think this is the best thing we've ever done. In 30 years, that's a pretty interesting statement. I think this is the best thing we've ever done. It is an investment in the individual's growth. The benefits that are reaped by the organization are important, but they're a side effect.
Okay.
So what we're really hoping to do with this is to provide a wonderful pipeline into the entire nonprofit sector of people who have some surety, a lot of confidence in themselves, the ability to face all of the issues that we've been facing the last 5 or 6 months. We think that that's very strong. And I will tell you anecdotally, I don't have the evaluative evidence on this yet, but anecdotally, make sure you fix that.
Yeah, we will.
When I talk to people who've been through the program, they have said the leadership program was so helpful to me. And again, it's because it primarily focuses on their growth.
Okay. So how do you define leadership?
For us, we wholeheartedly took a definition of leadership provided by Dr. Ronald Heifetz of Harvard. And I will hopefully not do Dr. Heifetz a disservice here because he's extraordinarily articulate. But his definition just resonated with us because he sorted out between technical leadership and adaptive leadership.
But that's what I was going to ask you about. What is adaptive leadership?
Well, let's start with the other one.
Okay.
So the technical leadership is that you have a certain skill and ability, right? So you are a superb professional writer and editor. That is a skill and an ability.
Right.
Our colleagues here have skill and ability with communications and communication devices. Every leader needs a skill. You don't need every skill to be the leader, but you need a skill.
Okay.
The adaptive leadership is how you respond, how you react, how you engage, how you innovate in whatever the circumstances are.
Okay.
So you might have a financial statement and you're able to read that statement and you understand the numbers.
Right.
That's the technical piece. The adaptive piece is what are you going to do with it?
Right. What does it mean?
What does that mean? How does that affect your organization? does it affect your organization at the moment? Do you need to adjust your strategy? Do you need to adjust your staffing? So Dr. Heifetz did this beautiful job, again, I'm not doing it justice, of sorting out those differentiations. And so when we developed the leadership program, we were very careful that this not be a technical program. It doesn't teach people how to read a financial statement or teach people how to put together a board of directors.
Okay.
There are hundreds of opportunities throughout the world, throughout the country, to train folks on how to do exactly those things.
Okay.
In a 30-minute webinar. This is all about adaptive leadership. So so each conversation is different. So one session might be on negotiation. There would be a session on difficult conversations. There's a session on storytelling to a certain extent, which is what you and I are doing, right?
Right, exactly.
How do you actually do the story? They tell their own personal stories, which they each do through 3 pictures that they have to bring. That alone would be a challenge, right? Find the 3 most meaningful pictures and bring them to share. The other, to me, I think one of the most important parts of this is it is a cohort model, and it is designed, these are peers, and it is designed to provide people a very safe space in which to share what their own challenges and concerns are. And from the evaluative information, we know that's exactly what's happening. And that has been another advantage in the middle of the pandemic.
Right.
Because these groups have cohered so well that if they have a challenge or something or they just need somebody to say, holy smokes.
Right.
They're talking to the folks within their cohort.
So would you say that some of the adaptive skills, which they have proven that in a lot of ways are even more important to indicate someone's likelihood to become a leader than actual academic, like grade point average, would be the ability to build a consensus, emotional, intelligence, empathy, those kinds of skills. Do you think that those are types of adaptive skills as well?
Absolutely, and I'm stealing this from someone I've just read recently too. But the comment was we should stop calling these things soft skills,
right?
Because they're not.
They're not. But
they're critical skills.
They are critical. But one of the things that I want to sort of play advocate with you on this a little bit is because a lot of times when there are programs and things that women are involved in, they do focus more on, these adaptive skills versus the technical. And when you think about the women and nonprofits, like the Follinger Foundation was started by 2 women. And according to you, 80% of foundations in the U.S. are led by women and operated by women. And the research shows that women comprise 77% of the grant-making staffs and 59% of grant-making CEOs in 2018. And when you look at that there's so much of women being involved in this field, because if you even think about, because I wanted to look at the history of like philanthropies and social services with women. I mean, you have Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who did the Special Olympics, Clara Barton, who did the Red Cross, the Susan Komen Foundation, which was Nancy Brinker. The women's clubs were the ones that were the precursors to the public libraries. Obviously, locally, we have the Follinger Foundation, we have the Vera Bradley Foundation, and even the English Bontner Mitchell Foundation. So it is a field that is very good for women, but also I'm wondering if, is it, do more people outside think of it, it's good that women do this because we, by nature, are caring and empathetic to others, and, do you think that helps to think about how you would need to teach or focus on leadership for women, and maybe not only do the adaptive skills, but also the hard technical? Because, a lot of women are afraid of numbers.
Well, you've asked me a couple different questions.
Yeah.
So let me start with a sort of a technical answer. So all of those numbers that you've identified, most of that comes from the Foundation Center. And if I remember correctly, the library is a member of what I think they call the Cooperating Collection of the Foundation Center. So you would have all those numbers. There are somewhere in the vicinity of 80,000 foundations across the country. A lot of those are very, very small. A lot of those are located in very small counties across the country. So you can understand that the staffing, in fact, might be female.
Right.
So a second piece of this is, I think that, 100 years ago or something, philanthropy might be considered to be a next step, the charitable outgrowth of many of the kinds of efforts that you just described. Dorothy Day is a particular favorite of mine, and of course she was, famous for setting up soup kitchens and all sorts of opportunities to serve the poor. There are, Fort Wayne has its own famous women who created, the YWCA,
Right.
for example, et cetera. I think that it is a field that particularly probably in the last 30 years, mostly because of the academic emphasis on philanthropic studies, which did not exist certainly in my day and certainly prior to that. That's something basically from the 1990s onward. There are couple hundred institutions of higher education across the country that offer some sort of advanced study. It could be a certificate, could be a bachelor's, could be a master's. Of very few entities offer a PhD. Certainly the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy in Indianapolis is premier in all of that. But I think what that did was professionalize the field. Many of the rest of us got there through some other door.
Okay.
In my case, it was a liberal arts door.
Right.
A couple of my colleagues came in through the finance door, right? So, but it is a wonderful opportunity to expand. I don't think it was intended to be a women's field.
Okay.
I think it is has been an arena in which women have been able to shine and
take on these very significant leadership roles.
Absolutely, and because you are responsible for significant amounts of money.
Right.
So from a philanthropic perspective, that would be a piece of it. And again, to the leadership component, I think all of those ongoing educational opportunities do strike the chord of the technical expertise and the adaptive expertise.
So it's sort of giving it the validation that this isn't just, for people starting something in their, kitchen or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In the rest of the nonprofit sector, in the charitable component, which is also going to have numbers very similar to that, fully staffed by women, quite confident that a lot of that is because the pay rates are not so great.
Right.
All right.
And that's what happens in any field, that when women become the predominant workforce.
Exactly. And we've seen that historically.
Yeah.
We've seen that historically. But these are also fields in which people are extraordinarily caring.
Right.
Right? So back to your other question, I think for people who are in the nonprofit charitable side of this, it's even more important that we provide them leadership training. There is a concern in certain quarters that the sector, the nonprofit sector, is not necessarily seen as a part of the decision-making process in any community or any state or in the country, and yet this is what we depend on.
Right.
This is what we depend on to deliver services. And so one of the very small things I think that an organization like ours can do, or other entities that provide leadership training, is help the people involved make their case to the larger community in terms of the value that they bring.
So, but the idea that, I just want to backtrack for a second, because what's the difference between a foundation and then like a nonprofit charitable organization? Or like foundations, they give the grants and the money, right? They don't traditionally offer the services, correct?
Correct.
And then the charitable, the nonprofit charitable entity, those are the ones who actually provide the services, correct?
Correct.
And then the umbrella of both the charitable and the foundations is philanthropy. Is that correct?
Is the nonprofit sector.
Is the nonprofit sector.
It's the nonprofit sector.
Okay.
And the other answer to your question is the main difference is how the IRS designates the entity.
Okay.
So the IRS designations are different. So the kind of organizations you and I are talking about would be referred to as public charities.
Okay.
And a private foundation is a private foundation. It's not a public charity.
Right.
Okay, but there are foundations, in fact, that are public charities,
Okay.
which is way more than you want to know.
Okay, but one of the things that I did think was very interesting, that with so many women in the nonprofit charitable sector, that Americans, less than 1.6% of Americans give to nonprofits that help women, specifically women and girls, in 2016.
That's fascinating. I did not know that.
And for perspective, though, the Americans the same year, they gave a total of $396.5 billion, with a B, dollars, and the majority of that is to and through to religious organizations and with affiliations.
Mm-hmm.
So why
Is
do
that from Giving USA?
Yeah.
That's probably your source. And if you look at that, you will also note, if you read the last 20 years worth of those reports, you would note that somewhere between 11 and 14%, it just fluctuates a little bit, of all of that giving comes from foundations. And so what that tells the person who is a fundraiser
Okay.
is that individual donors are where they need to pay their focus.
However, what they were saying, though, is that, and this plays into my wanting to know how the mission or direction of a foundation or even a charitable organization, because big donors are playing even a bigger role. So from adjusted income of $1 million or more, the donations that they give has tripled from 10.3% annually in 1993 to 31.7% in 2016.
Isn't that a good thing?
I don't know, because what I want to know is, does that impact the boards of these organizations? Does it impact the mission and objective, because the person with the biggest checkbook sort of sets the direction, or the puts the people on the board for an organization? I don't know. I was wondering how that impacts or affects.
I think if you're talking, well, first of all, I don't know either, but I think if you're talking about public charities, again, every one of those organizations is overseen by a board of directors.
Okay.
And, again, it's a requirement of the IRS. There's a minimal requirement on how few you can have, right?
Right.
And most of them have significantly more than that. All of them have an obligation, and all the board members have an obligation to recognize what their duties are to
Okay.
that or to that entity. And I think it's the board's job to make sure that a person who may have significant resources does not tilt what the organization does in one way or the other. And it would be very difficult for an executive director to do that.
Okay.
Very difficult.
Now, in most cases, is the executive director a member of the board, or no? They report.
Not very often.
Okay.
Correct.
So, but a lot of boards of organizations now are at a crossroads, because a lot of the founders of these organizations and the founding board members, or most of the board members, are baby boomers, and they're older and they're retiring. So how do you make that transition? Because isn't it true that an organization is only as strong as its board of directors?
I would absolutely agree with that.
Okay.
There's a wonderful life cycle of nonprofit organizations. Susan Stevens created this probably 25 years ago, and it's still something that a lot of us use, because it shows the growth, brand new organization, here's the founder, people you're talking about, maybe the founding board members, and then it grows here, and then over here it encounters some sort of a challenge, somebody leaves, the board, massively changes,
Right.
and then, here is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Because aren't you the last person at the Follinger Foundation who actually had the opportunity to meet the Follingers? Is that?
No.
No?
I'm the last person who worked with the people who Ms. Follinger chose
Okay.
to run the foundation.
Okay, so you're the last of that connection to
Correct.
the original. So
Right.
that would be part of this transition, right? In your phase of the
Yeah,
of
and
the
it's
life
also
cycle.
part of why I believe they asked me to stay on the board.
Right, to have that
right.
institutional knowledge and that consistency.
Right. But I think to your question, again, there is this massive movement. We boomers are
Right.
moving around, going somewhere.
Right.
And this is the board's job, right? The board is supposed to be prepared for that. Every organization and every board ought to have an emergency succession plan, because you don't know what's going to happen to somebody. We don't know what's happening this afternoon to us. They should have an emergency succession plan, and they should have a formal succession plan. So, it's a process of doing business.
Right.
Not something everybody necessarily thinks about.
Okay.
Extraordinarily important for them to have that, so that what you've just identified as a potential challenge is not a challenge. If the person is a baby boomer, one should make the assumption that that person is going to retire in this window or this window. Probably would be a good idea to ask that person that question. But even if they don't have, and a lot of people don't have the exact answer, but they can give you a window. But the prep ought to be done.
So is the emphasis that the Follinger Project is doing on leadership, especially with your emerging leaders, is that also in the hopes that they may want to then take positions on other boards?
On other boards, and or grow in their own organization, and or move to another organization in a higher leadership position. So, the theory here is not just that person would necessarily stay where they are for the rest of their life.
But how do you, isn't it also the responsibility of the board, to ensure, or how do you feel that should they have people who are the constituents that they're looking to serve on the board to help them remain relevant and engaged in because most people who are on boards are not necessarily the users of the charitable organization services?
I think every organization is different. You will find in this community and all over the country that there are certain boards that actually require that.
Okay.
There are some organizations also that receive significant federal government funding that require that. There are organizations that choose that, to have constituents on the board. I think that's fine. I also think that organizations need to do a superb job of surveying the people that they serve. They also have, and I'm not sure everybody uses this all the time, but their own internal sort of evaluative mechanisms, if you will, within their staff. If you're an organization that is, for example, providing case management services, your case managers know what the challenges are for the people they serve, right? And so getting that information back, there's a variety of ways to get the information back.
How do you encourage people in the community to join a board? Speaking personally, I would have no idea how to go about wanting to join a board or think about it. And I always thought, and the reason I haven't necessarily, one is as a journalist, but the other is because I always thought that on a board, either I have to be able to give a certain amount of money to the organization, or I have to be able to fundraise a certain amount of money in order to earn my seat on a board. So that's why I've always been, very hesitant, because I don't have that, abilities. So that's why I've never considered it. And so is that true, or what? How do people in the community, if they think, I would like to be on a board?
Well, I think there's a couple different ways. So one is, and in particular for sort of the young professionals, Follinger has funded for, 8 or 9 years, a project through YLNI called Get On Board. And it is a very quick 4 or 5 hour training opportunity and you don't have to be a young leader member, they just are the organizing entity. And it is a 4 or 5 hour training on, if you wanted to serve on a board, here's what it requires. These are your legal responsibilities, this is your sort of moral responsibility, this is what is expected of you. So we do fund that. We also fund a training project through the Barber, Burt Innovative Leader Fund. These are for people who are existing board members. So in addition to the staff, we also have board member training. We can talk about that in a little more depth if you want. But I think that, again, this is sort of my repetitive motion here, but every board is different. So some boards expect every board member to contribute. Now, and I just had this conversation in a group an hour and a half ago. But the issue is contribute at their ability.
Okay.
So what many boards like to be able to say, and is very impressive, particularly again to governmental groups, is we have 100% board participation. So I might give them $5 and you might give them $50. Nobody's reporting that.
Right.
So that's one piece.
Okay.
And I think that sometimes people don't know about that. I think the way to discover boards is to first of all think about what are your personal passions. If you're particularly interested in literacy, if you are you are a journalist, if you are particularly interested in after school tutoring,
right?
There are specific organizations that do that. I know the Community Foundation also provides a lot of education and training around that. And what I would just reach out to one of them and say, hey, I'd like to be a volunteer. To me, again, everybody needs to do what they would do. I would start as a volunteer.
Right. You want to get to know the organization,
and you want them to get to know you.
Right.
And in the process of that, you can ask all of these questions. Do you expect board financial participation? Do you expect me to be a fundraiser? Are there certain volunteer things that I can do that would provide you? Because part of this is there was an old expression for this, psychic income for you, and also what can you do for the organization? And I think that's the negotiating place to start.
Okay.
But figure out where your passions are. If you're particularly passionate about animals, then you would go to.
Actually, and the Follinger Foundation was instrumental in helping the ASPCA and Hope for Animals merge. Yeah. And I actually took my dog to get neutered at Hope for Animals, but I originally thought that it wasn't just for anybody in the community. I thought they only did like either people who couldn't afford a vet or for the cats in the community cats and stuff. And actually someone I worked with said no, they do it for everybody, and I thought it was the perfect place because that's all they do all day.
Right.
And so but the Follinger Foundation was really instrumental in bringing those two organizations together.
Yeah, we provided them what is called a capacity grant in order to, because it's a negotiating piece, right? And how does it end up so that both entities come together? That's a wonderful example, Sarah, and I was so impressed when they did their news conference and they showed both names still together, and then they were talking about bonded pairs. I don't know if you heard that. The lady who, Jessica Henry, who runs SPCA, was talking about, I had never heard this before because I don't have any animals, that often they get maybe a dog and a cat. 2 dogs, but she had a picture of a dog and a cat, and they have bonded.
You have to adopt them together. Yes.
So they call them bonded pairs. Well, they used that theme and the picture, and then it has SPCA and Hope for Animals, that they have become a bonded pair. It was absolutely fabulous and resonates, right? But I mean, I think that's it. Find the organization that resonates with you, and go to them and say, I'm really interested in knowing more about this. I'm interested in knowing about volunteer opportunities. And then sort of work your way through that process. And in the process, you would also find out, do they meet every month?
Right.
Do they meet on Fridays when you're taping?
Right.
Do they meet, I mean, a lot of it also has to be
But I also
how it works
thought
for
with
you.
some of the bigger boards, I always thought that you're like like they ask you if you would like to be on a board. I didn't realize that you know.
Well, I think it goes both ways.
Okay.
Every organization hopefully has, and the names change around, but either what they call a governance committee or a nominating committee or a board development committee.
Okay.
So 20 years ago they were all called nominating committees. It's really sort of adjusted to this governance committee because they should be looking at things in addition to how do we get board members. But every organization has one of those, and that's what they are doing. They are looking for people.
And then the Barber Burt Innovative Leader Fund that you created. Well, first of all, who was Barber Burt?
Oh, the question to my heart. Barber Burt was the best leader and the best mentor any person could ever have, and I was totally blessed to have her. So Mrs. Burt was a longtime philanthropic leader. Was the president of the Junior League, was the first president of the MLK Montessori Board. She was the executive director of the Community Foundation for a number of years. Then she came to the Follinger Foundation. She was the president, CEO,
Okay.
and then she was the chair of the board.
Okay.
Long time history and experience, just superb, a brilliant, brilliant lady, and I was very blessed to have her. So we created the Barber Burt Innovative Leader Fund, and it provides money to bring in speakers who are now providing webinars as opposed to seminars on topics that the boards ought to know about. Because one of the things we know about nonprofit boards is that they turn over constantly.
Okay.
There's this constant churn, which makes perfect sense.
Right.
Because there are term limits.
Right.
Most boards have them. Some of them don't.
Okay.
Which is not a bad thing.
Right.
But so you can never assume that Board X has had training on strategy and you don't ever need to do it again.
Right.
There's this constant turnover. So the Burt Fund provides speakers and seminars to do exactly that.
For the boards.
For the board.
Right, because Barbara Burt, she said that to affect those, if you're in the heart, the responsible nonprofits have to show that they can use their heads.
Absolutely,
so it's not, you
Mrs.
have
Burt.
to have all those, technical skills as well as, and it is so important because when you think about like the boards they're the ones who do the selection committee of a new executive director or president. And
absolutely.
So in the last year, we've had some boards select new leadership, both the next president and CEO of the Follinger Foundation, the United Way of Allen County, and then also
Board of Health.
The Board of Health, and Vincent Village as well.
And Fort Wayne Community Schools.
Right. So what is it that boards need to think about, or what did the Follinger Foundation think about when looking for a leader for the 21st century, also faced with the decline of people giving, the way in which they want to give, and certainly in the time of COVID, and then also because COVID sort of shows things that you need to be prepared for that we didn't even know about or need to be prepared for, and then it also brought to the surface a lot of things that we're not prepared to cover, in terms of food scarcity and loneliness, or having kids being able to have proper Wi-Fi in order to go online for education. So what role does the board have in looking at, thinking about what their organization needs as a leader for the 21st century? And what do you think are the critical skills that a new leader for any of these organizations need to adapt to everything that we're faced in the 21st century?
Well, multiple questions again.
Yes, again, yes.
So every board is going to have a different set of requirements that they think that the organization needs. So I don't think that we can just, across the landscape say this.
But based on, there's got to be some fundamental skills that would make someone more successful, or to be able to adapt to being the executive director or president in the 21st century and the world that we're facing.
I think it's a technical and adaptive answer, right? I think you need a leader who has some understanding of whatever it is you do.
Okay.
Right? And some passion for what you do. So, if you're in a I don't know, again, a literacy arena.
Right.
You don't necessarily need someone who's been a tutor, but you certainly need someone who can speak to the importance and the value of literacy and why they personally think that is a critical thing, right? They don't necessarily have to, but you want somebody who's passionate about what you're doing. I think in this day and age, you want someone who either knows something about that or is clearly able to articulate their willingness to learn and how they would do that.
Okay.
Here's my starting point. Hopefully there's never an ending point. This is my personal thing. There should never be an ending point in learning. You and I are learning right now.
Right,
okay?
Absolutely.
And so that would be a piece of it. I think then everyone uses all these other words like innovative, creative, approachable. but each organization has to define what that means. You know, what is innovative to an entrepreneurial organization
is not the same
as what is going to be innovative to a social service organization necessarily. So you are right. There are certain things I think that are needed. I think the ability to process, the ability to think and to process, the ability to find others to have a conversation with in the same way you and I are, is something that boards need to look at in prospective leaders. These days, I think you also need someone who has had some leadership experience, particularly if you're coming in with a team, you know, knowing the challenges and the opportunities of human resources is clearly of value. Now, not all of these things necessarily are of the same importance, and each organization has to identify right now in our life cycle what is the most critically important thing.
How important is fundraising, the ability to raise funds and for an executive director or president?
Well, again, it depends what kind of organization you're at, right? In our organization, it's not relevant.
Right.
In public charities, I think it's very relevant. But again, what's the size of the organization? You see what I mean? This is why these are all different. If the organization has 3 full-time staff people, then your ED probably really ought to know a whole lot about fundraising.
That's your executive director, right?
That's your executive director.
Okay.
If you've got 27 staff people or 500 staff people, you probably have a whole department that is development. But your executive director still needs to be a critical component of that.
Okay.
Right? But it's the fundraising piece is a partnership between the board and the staff. You know, ideally what the staff does is the preparation work. Here are people who have the prospect of being able to be our donors, or here are people who have shown some interest in the past. Perhaps we could ask them for a little more. But the board really should be doing the ask.
Okay. The board does the ask.
The board should be doing the ask.
Okay.
It doesn't happen that way in a lot of
instances. Well, the ask
instances.
is always hard for everybody.
Right.
That's probably in the leadership course. You probably talk about that.
Yes.
Because people need to ask for what they want or what they need.
Exactly.
So, with everything that's going on with the impact of COVID-19 crisis, how is philanthropy changed in this idea of social impact or social welfare? How has it changed, and where do you think it's going?
Well, I think you've seen a number of things. One of the things that you've seen philanthropy do is react and do it fast. You know, I will speak for our own organization retroactively. Is that appropriate? I don't know.
Yeah.
But
you pivoted and created like a COVID emergency fund, and right?
Well, we did, and we also made outright grants to our already existing grantees, and this has absolutely nothing to do with me. This has to do with my former colleagues. I made that announcement on Tuesday. All those organizations had that money in hand by Thursday.
Wow.
Because we were ready, and you know, they were it, and they had the money, which was $1.1 million, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
And then we had the additional fund. So, but you saw this all across the country. You know, so reacting quickly. And philanthropy, particularly private foundations, but philanthropy has the ability to do that. A second thing that you've seen, and I think you're going to see more of, the new lingo is called trust-based philanthropy. When you've been around a long time, the lingo just keeps changing, but it's the same stuff.
It's the same principle. They just give it a new spin.
They give it a new name, right? It's the name du jour. But one of the things trust-based philanthropy has been talking about, and I participated in a seminar on this in June, is let's just give people operating support. Well, I smiled about that because, you know, Follinger, 65% of its grants are operating support and have been for 20 plus years.
And operating grants are the ones that literally for you to keep your doors open.
Exactly.
Right.
You can use them for anything except, you know, stuff.
Right, because when you apply for a lot of grants, you can't use those funds for salaries or the building. You need to use them for the actual services you provide. Yeah.
Right. But operating is exactly, you know, it's salaries, it's insurance, it's, you know, gasoline for your vehicles or whatever it is. So you see a lot more organizations talking about operating support. Another change that you've seen, and I think it's going to stick in some form or fashion, is an adjustment in the reporting processes. You know, they can be tedious or long or involved.
Okay.
And you know, we just suspended reporting for 6 months, as a matter of fact. Lots of organizations have done that, but I think that the whole processes are going to be tweaked so that they are, first of all, much more relational, and secondly, a lot less detail, a lot less paper. So that's a change you're going to see. There are a lot of organizations that have dug into their principle because, you know, the economic crisis hit everybody.
Right.
Right. So your amount went from this to this.
Right.
So if you give more, you're now taking that out of the principle.
Out of the principle, right.
And that is a conversation that is ongoing in the philanthropic press this morning, right? More and more entities, I think, will be doing that. I think it will also spur more discussions around what is known in the field as spending down.
Okay, right,
right,
right, because that's the idea that some foundations, they're built with the idea that it's not like the Follinger Foundation that's meant to be sustainable and continue to ongo in perpetuity, but literally they are created with the amount of money, and the idea is to spend it all, to not need the organization or charitable organization anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
And the you know, the biggest example of that, of course, is the Gates Foundation.
Right.
But there are a lot of them that have been set up that way. These are donors that actually want to see all their funding spent either in their lifetime or certainly in their children's.
Right.
And this conversation is
going to be bubbling up.
It's going to be bubbling up even
so
more.
With all these changes and your big change, what's next for you? I mean, you have such an incredible knowledge base, and we've talked about it, in institutional knowledge and experience, and you know, what are some of your plans?
Well, so I'm in my transition mode. This is only week 3, but I am a member of the Indiana Philanthropy Alliance board.
Right, and you just joined the Indiana Humanities
board.
You're going to be. I think there's going to be a lot of boards looking for you.
Yeah, I think I'm at my limit. I'm also on the Indiana Parks Association board, and I'm still on the Fort Wayne Quest Club board.
Okay.
I
have one more year before I can join.
Get into Quest.
Yeah.
I'm a past president of Quest, so I'm still on that board.
Okay.
It does not have a lot of committees and subcommittees, so I'm doing quite a bit of that work. I have been helping some of my foundation colleagues in other states and or in other counties, just try to strategize, and you know, have the same sort of dinner table conversation about, oh my gosh, you know, there've been all these changes. How is that going to affect what you're doing, both individually, and how does that affect your organization? And I have to tell you, Sarah, I'm loving that.
I would think. I mean, you would be invaluable to anybody to help them think about, you know, keep what they need to do in the strategy and how to look at what services they provide, and you know, I think that would be invaluable.
Well, I don't know about that so much as it's kind of what we were talking about earlier with cohorts. People need somebody to talk to.
Yes.
Who is not, you know, it's not one of my board members, and it's not as if you had to go to your board chair and say, hey, I don't know what to do here.
Right.
Nobody wants to do that, but. You know, you can have that conversation with me, especially if you're in Wichita or somewhere, because I don't know any of those people.
Sure.
And that's not going to affect your performance
evaluation. Well, it's why I believe, it's like you're a therapist for, you're actually what they now call a professional coach.
Yeah.
That's what a coach does, is help you. But I think that everybody needs that, to be able to talk through things and sort of get someone who's not in their day-to-day world to give a perspective. And so I think you could hang out. You could be the first philanthropy professional coach.
I love that.
So,
well, I might just pursue that. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's very complimentary, and I thank you for that.
Well, I mean, I told you that I think a lot of what you do, you can apply to so many sectors beyond, and that people would utilize your skills and talents. I think they're applicable across the board. So
I think for me, the benefit is I learn so much from these conversations. it's just, I'm mesmerized by the way people think.
Right.
And fascinated at how in a dialogue, you might start here and I start here and we end up over here.
Right.
And this is fabulous.
And you just talked, that is why I wanted to do this, for that very reason.
Oh.
So at the end of each And Good Company show, I ask guests the same 12 questions
Oh, boy.
that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game.
Oh, I wish you told me this.
No.
Okay.
And Proust believed that by answering these questions, a person reveals his or her true nature.
Oh, my. This
So,
is frightening.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word? Wisdom.
What is your least favorite word?
No.
What turns you on creatively, emotionally, or spiritually?
Oh, reading, of course.
What turns you off creatively, emotionally, or spiritually?
People spouting numbers.
What sound or noise do you love?
Water. Rippling water.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Large machinery.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt? This may have relevance.
What profession other than my own would I like to attempt? I would like to be a literature teacher.
Like a professor? Yeah. What profession would you not like to do?
Probably sewer repair.
What-
I appreciate them and admire the people who
Right.
do that work.
But just going down under in the tunnel, yeah?
Yeah, no.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement, for which I had 50% of the responsibility and maybe even less, was have a fabulous marriage.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
You're the second person this week who asked
Oh,
me this
really?
question. Yes, my paternal grandmother, who had 5 children, 4 of whom under the age of 5, was 8 months pregnant when her husband was killed,
Oh, wow.
and managed to rear those children, all of whom grew up, all of whom were
Productive.
secure, were productive
Wow.
people who had the same marriage and raised their own children.
Wow.
I would love to have known that woman.
Yeah.
I miss that
Well, I
part
think you
of me.
admire strong women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think she would have been, and apparently I look like her.
Oh.
Apparently that's where all these curls came from.
Well, maybe that'll be like a book you'll do. You could do the research and learn more about her.
Loretta and me.
Right.
I can see it
Right.
now.
How would you like to die?
Of a massive coronary.
So, okay.
Quickly.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well done, good and faithful servant.
That
And
seems
I'm-
to be the...
And I'm letting you in anyway.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for such an enlightening conversation. Again, this seems to be my other theme. I don't even touch the surface in all the things that I want to talk to you about. So I hope that you will have enjoyed our conversation, that you'll want to come back and join me again, and we can continue to talk about lots of these issues that our community faces.
I would love to do that. This was very enlightening, and you've given me 100 questions, which is a great gift, and I appreciate that.
Great. Well, thank you.
All right.
Please join me next time when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.